We are live streamed. Welcome, everyone. I'd like to call to order our regular city council meeting for February 1st. Cannot believe it's February 2022. Would everyone please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Council. Sylvia, roll call.
Mayor Mays,
Here.
Council President Rosner,
Here.
Councilor Garland,
Here.
Councilor Browse,
Here.
Councilor Young,
Here.
Councilor Griffin,
Here.
Councilor Scott.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia. Next on the agenda is approval of the agenda.
I make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
Thank you, Kim and Russell. Discussion on the motion. Hearing none, all in favor of approving the agenda as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next, we have two items on the consent agenda this evening. First is the approval of the January 18th, 2022 City Council meeting minutes. And item B is Resolution 2022-007, authorize the city manager to sign a grant agreement for broadband expansion.
I move consent.
Second.
Thank you, Renee and Kim. Discussion on the motion. Hearing none, all in favor of approving the consent agenda as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks. Next on our agenda is citizen comments. Sylvia, do we have any written citizen comments this evening?
We do not, Mayor.
Thank you, Sylvia. Do we have anyone waiting in the wings to give testimony live?
I'm not seeing anybody new.
Okay. Thank you, Brad. Thank you, Sylvia. We will move on to public hearings. We have one item on public hearings this evening. Ordinance 2022-001, amending Title VI of the Municipal Code as it relates to the regulation of backyard chickens. Sylvia, for this one, you don't need to read any. Oh, it's an ordinance. You need to read your thing, right?
Correct, Mayor. I do. The Sherwood City Council will hold a public hearing this evening to receive testimony on Ordinance 2022-001, amending Title VI of the Municipal Code as it relates to the regulation of backyard chickens. The public hearing this evening will be conducted as follows. Staff will present a staff report. Questions, if any, by the City Council for staff. We will then consider written testimony. Mayor and Council, we have not received any testimony for this ordinance.
Thank you, Sylvia. Julia.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. What you have before you in this ordinance is essentially the same thing that was before the council back in 2015. At that time, after public hearing with the Planning Commission and feedback that was received, the council at the time decided not to take action on the ordinance. And then over the subsequent years since 2015, council has continued to get questions and comments. And so you asked for a work session, which was held in October of 2021 to discuss whether or not you wanted to allow a process for regulating chickens other than our current process, which is a conditional use permit, which essentially is a process that nobody has chosen to use. At the work session, we presented or represented the information that had been prepared previously, and we got the nod to bring forward that prior language for council's consideration this evening. This would amend the municipal code to add a new section for chickens. So I'll just kind of briefly go over what's in the code. Essentially, it would allow a process for permitting chickens. The license would be valid for 5 years. Chickens would only be allowed on property that it has a detached single-family dwelling. You could have up to 3 hens if the property is at least 7,000 square feet, and up to 5 hens if it's 10,000 square feet or larger. No roosters are permitted. And then it does say you could have the chicks inside if they're 12 weeks and old or less. There's also regulations regarding where the enclosure would have to be, and that it has to be maintained in good repair and not attracting rats and things like that. Not part of the specific ordinance. Well, the ordinance itself, the language does indicate that we would provide notice to neighbors to let them know that a permit had been issued, and giving them the information so that they kind of know where to go to if there are issues or concerns. And so in your packet as an attachment to the staff report is an example of a letter that we would send out. Just that's more for council's information, and as well as a copy of a draft application form that we're proposing to use. You wouldn't be adopting that, but it's just more for your information. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, and recommend that you hold a hearing and consider adoption of the ordinance.
All right. Thank you, Julia. First, before council asks questions or chimes in on the proposal, once again, seeing if there's anybody in the wings that wants to testify live in support or opposition of the proposed ordinance.
I don't see anybody new other than everybody that's already here.
So the answer is no, Brad?
Correct. Yes. No.
All right. So we will close the public hearing portion of the first reading of this proposed ordinance. Questions of Julia? Thanks, Julia. I think this does, it follows the feedback you received in our work session. And I think it's safe to say on council, people that nobody thinks is perfect. People either think it's too conservative or too liberal. So it must be, we hit it probably pretty square in the face when that's the case. So is what it is. There's a path, not a very difficult path to be able to get them if you want them. And Kim, questions or comments?
Just a comment. So, and a question. So I was like 2015, I was at that meeting and I was pretty opposed to chickens. I just thought after hearing the testimony during that time frame, and I'm surprised we don't have any letters or any testimony this time around. But after hearing the information that staff gathered for us from our surrounding cities, and that they've really had zero issues, with their code compliance and whatnot, it just seems like, we're probably the only one who doesn't allow them, but probably not the only one, but mostly in our surrounding area. It just kind of makes sense that it's now, and they're not going to be all over our city. I mean, most of the HOAs are not going to allow them. Our lot sizes.
A tiny fraction,
right,
in town will fit lot size, and not in an HOA that it doesn't prohibit it, or not, not in a restricted.
So just
HOA.
to clarify with Julie, then you can't have them if you have less than 7,000 square feet lot, right?
Correct.
Okay.
You would not get a permit if they're less.
You would not get a permit.
Yeah.
And if you are found with unpermitted chickens, there's a $250 fine.
I'm not
education.
certain. Yeah, it would be a code
Education
compliance
first.
action. So
Yeah.
I don't know that it would necessarily go immediately to a citation, but it would go
Right.
through the process.
But there is that ability,
Yeah.
if it came down to, but the education
Compliance
component
is
for-
best. Education compliance
Yeah.
is best.
And then I'll also add that in part, this is an amendment to the municipal code, which is a little bit easier to change than a development code change. And so if there are, if you do encounter issues or concerns going forward, it's a little bit easier to change. And then with the permit being valid for only 5 years, again, you're not going to have somebody that's necessarily vested for a long period of time. with those chickens.
And if we found that we are unlike our neighbors and we have all kinds of issues, this can be changed again.
Yep, most definitely.
Thanks, Kim. Tim, your hand's up next.
Well, thank you, Kim, because you covered a lot of the points I wanted to make. I'll just reiterate one thing. I had a lot of comfort with this when we got all the feedback from other jurisdictions and what their experience in terms of actual issues with their communities around chickens. So I think it's this is my opinion, long time overdue. My personal opinion about chickens, I grew up with them. As long as we don't have roosters, we're good. But I think it's going to be fine. So thank you to the staff for all the hard work on this. I know there was a lot of extra research involved. I really appreciate it. And I think it's a good ordinance.
Scott?
Really?
All right, I apologize. Counselor Scott.
I agree. I'm in favor of this. I do think there is a glaring omission from page 28. So not necessarily in the code itself, but in the application. I think one of the bullet points on standards needs to point out that, applicant, is required to check with their HOA if they have one to ensure that they're allowed to have, whatever the right language is,
Yeah,
right? But we talked about that
absolutely.
extensively at the work session, that we need to make them aware that they have to get HOA approval or
Reminder, yeah.
and it's not
We don't want to
mentioned.
be in the business of policing that.
No. But it needs to be pointed out that, hey, you need to go check with your HOA to make sure you're eligible.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, since several on council can never have chickens. Because they are in an HOA that prohibits it. Thanks, Doug. Sean?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of chime in a little bit with my perspective on this as well. I was also at some of those backyard chicken meetings those were prior to us coming on council, Kim and I coming on council, but I was just interested in hearing how a city council would handle such a divisive issue. And it certainly was at the time. So I sat in on those meetings and heard both sides of the arguments. And I think there were some very persuasive arguments back then for backyard chickens. And I think even in today's climate, they're even more so are they persuasive to me. And I had those in mind when I was listening to a work session when we had a lot of people who had dietary issues who wanted to know where their food was coming from. And, as we see some issues with our grocery stores and hopefully not running out of food, but, the ability for people to have their own food and things like that, I think is great for those people who want to do that. I'm a city kid. I don't do chickens or wildlife or livestock. It's not my thing. I would not want to have chickens, but I think, what I also heard from the other side of the argument back then as well, and you still hear a little bit from people today, a lot of the concerns that they had with noise and disease and there's other nuisance type of things. And I think, backing up, I think what Tim said as well, when we did get that data from Julia that she compiled from other suburbs around us in similar situations, I'm sure they had the same concerns when they were talking about it, and they're just not seeing those things there that we were afraid of, and that I personally was afraid of, and so that's really what kind of won me over as well. My initial thought was that I wasn't a big fan of that. I mean, I see Sherwood as a city, not a farm. So, but I think, I'm ready to move forward with this as well, and happy to allow for those chickens for the people who want them.
Thanks, Sean. Russell?
I'm just also supportive. I just want to put in my 2 cents. And I think it's fine if people want to have chickens as long as they meet those rules. The city is not going to outlaw hawks in the city. So I told my hawk story when I had chickens outside the city limits. I'm not going to tell it again because it's a gory one. Just keep your chickens safe. That's all I got to say. Thank you.
We do live near a refuge.
That's right.
I did receive one comment from somebody who used to live in Sherwood that now has lived in Newburgh, and she saw I had posted on my council page that chickens were coming up at this meeting, and she said just so we knew, what'd she say right here? I wanted to tell you about my experience since moving to the country and getting some chickens. Chickens are fun, but chickens do attract rats. Luckily, they have enough space, blah, blah, blah. So they said, as much as they keep their coops clean, they still have the rat problem, more raccoons, blah, blah, blah. So
Yeah.
she wasn't necessarily opposed to it. She doesn't live in Sherwood anymore anyways, but just wanted to give me her experience. And so I guess we'll see how it goes.
Yeah. Everybody that I've known that have had or wanted chickens in a city ended up, as soon as the whatever crop of or few they had died, they never did it again. Either they died from natural causes or wildlife causes or escaped and disappeared. So it's just, the important thing, if and I believe this will pass as it's written, I think it's a good compromise. Remember, a lot of homes, a lot of residences in town just don't qualify.
Right.
Because you don't have the space, and that's just the way it is. There's other ways of getting, if you aren't eligible for whatever reason, because you live in a neighborhood that HOA prohibits it or whatever, there's other ways of getting those farm fresh eggs.
Another question.
Does council want, this is an ordinance, we do 2 readings per charter unless there's an exception. Doug, your hand's up.
Sorry, I just thought of another question, going back to the eligibility thing. So let's say someone submits an application. What kind of validations are you doing to make sure they're eligible before you issue the permit? Like whether they're square footage eligible, if I submit one and I'm in Woodhaven, presumably I'm not eligible, but you might not know every HOA in town and every address in town. Like what kind of stuff are you doing?
So we would not deny an application because it's against the HOA rules, but we would have on the checklist that they need to check with the HOA. So
Okay.
there's that. Just because, like someone said, we're not in the business of enforcing HOA regulations. We would check the lot size and confirm that they meet the criteria outlined in the code and confirm that before we issue the permit.
And you'd also
So
look at
let me
approval.
ask a question a different way.
Mhm.
Let's say I live next to someone on staff or down the road from someone on staff, and they live in an HOA and they are the one processing the application, and they see it come in and they know for a fact that I am in an HOA and not eligible. What would happen?
So we would probably say, hey, Counselor Scott, you're in an HOA. You might want to check with your HOA.
Save the money.
Yeah, I mean,
So it's more of like, if they happen to know that this address or person is in an HOA, they might reach out to that person. If they didn't, then
yeah, I mean,
they
certainly
might
if there was a
send it
red
through.
flag and we know that they're in a HOA, I mean, if the address is clearly in an HOA, that would probably be a courtesy that we would give them and say, we don't think you're allowed. You might want to check with your HOA before you spend the money, or would you like a refund type of thing?
And if let's say we issued an application for someone who's in an HOA that's not eligible and they get chickens, and if the neighbor complains to the city, do we say go back to your HOA and work through them, or does our code compliance handle it?
Again,
So we would refer them
we
back to
would
their
not
HOA.
enforce the HOA regulations. That would be up to the HOA to enforce.
I'm good on all that. I just want to clarify exactly what the process will be, because invariably these things will happen. And
Yeah.
I want to make sure
It should be treated just like we would treat like fence code issues, like where
no, but we have
we allow a fence, but the HOA doesn't.
Yeah.
That the HOA needs to police that.
Yep. I agree. Yep. Just want to make sure. Thank you.
Mhm.
That's helpful.
Thanks, Doug. Other questions? Does council want to extend this? We have this is on the agenda in 2 weeks for a second reading.
Yes.
Stick with second reading. Yep.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
I think so, just because we didn't have any testimony, which I'm surprised given the amount we had in 2015. And I think a couple of us advertised it. So it was out there in social media land, but maybe people didn't get wind of it. And so it gives 2 more weeks for people to give us their input if they wanted to.
Yep.
Great. Awesome. Thanks, Julia. All right, moving on to city manager report.
Thank you,
Keith?
Mr. Mayor and Council. I would like to say I had enough intelligence and humility not to try to follow chickens, but I will foolishly do a brief update. I want to thank Craig and the Public Works staff. I've noticed in coming into the city limits, the Welcome to Sherwood sign, that we've updated our population. So just to let everyone know, our new population numbers for Sherwood was 20,496. So shout out to Craig for getting our new numbers up. I appreciate that. And with that, I will try to be smart and not follow chickens, and staff and myself are available for any questions.
Great. Questions?
That's
for
all you
Keith?
got?
All I
One
got.
population?
He's keeping it simple. Any other questions for Keith or his team? All right, hearing none. Council announcements.
I'll go first.
Volunteers? All right.
I'll go first. Planning Commission. So if you see or talk to a planning commissioner anytime soon, thank them for their volunteer effort and their hours. Planning Commission meeting last week went 6 hours and 45 minutes. Started at 6.
Insane.
That is a
Okay,
record.
policy
Wait,
thing we're following up on.
Doug,
Mr.
we're
Conway?
trying to recruit.
We're
my
No,
gosh.
that's rare. It doesn't happen every. Don't worry, join Planning Commission. It's great. No, it really is great. But they started at 6 and went till 12:45 a.m. So and also shout out to staff who was there, all of that time as well, and probably worked all day, well, along with the volunteers, I'm sure. So three really important public hearings were ongoing that all have some level of complexity, and the Planning Commission and staff and the applicants, and there was a lot of testimony from the public, which was also great to see. Not to get into the specifics, but there was a lot of really diligent question and answering, and really wanting to be thorough and make sure that these hearings are going appropriately. They've all been continued. One of them will be next week at Planning Commission meeting, and I think the other ones will be in February or later on in February. So keep an eye on the agendas there, because there's definitely a lot of stuff coming. And then also at the upcoming Planning Commission meeting next Tuesday, there will be a work session around housing choices, specifically focused on cottage clusters, which has been an area we've been working on for several years now, as we work through the comprehensive plan update, which has been passed, and then now into kind of our housing choices and HB 2001 implementation and other things. So that will be the work session next week at 6:15. You can zoom into that, and then at the public meeting we'll be talking about the aforementioned continuance of Oregon Street Business Park, and then there'll be another public hearing with some minor code updates for the marijuana land use section. So just some code cleanup work there, or adjustments needed because of changes in law that have happened over the last couple of years. So I think that is the rest of my updates. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Doug. Volunteers?
I can go.
Hey, Russell.
Let's see, the Parks Board is meeting on the 7th. That's next Monday night. It'll be interesting meeting. We have people coming to help the Parks Board understand their role and how funding works, and all kinds of cool things are going to happen at that meeting. And then I think everybody heard, the Cruise In has announced their dates this summer, and Robinhood Festival last week announced they're planning on the 3rd week in July. That's the 15th and 16th. And I think the archery tournament winds up on Sunday the 17th. So fingers crossed, let's hope we have a summer filled with festivals. So that's it. That's all I got.
Great. Next. Kim, I see you're not muted.
Yeah, I don't have much. Trying to think. Police Advisory Board, we went over some new policies which will be coming this way. The YMCA Board of Managers hasn't met in quite some time. They're just sort of dealing with the staff shortages and trying to just keep afloat over there. So that's sort of been put on the back burner. And then my other liaison, community development block grant. Last Thursday, I spent half the day in Zoom, unfortunately, but listening to grant application presentations, and all of us policy advisory board members scored the applicants, and those awards will be coming out here probably in the next couple weeks as to who scored those grants. So that's all I got.
Awesome. Thanks, Kim. Renee, anything?
Yeah, sorry about that. Just wanted to take a moment to thank staff. I mean, in this time where there's staffing shortages and people being sick and COVID and all that kind of stuff, times are difficult, and I'm so appreciative of what our staff does. And as I was preparing for a report today, I looked at specifically my 2 assignments, which are the Library Advisory Board and the Senior Advisory Board. And I look at what both of those facilities are doing. For instance, the senior center has gone way over the amount of meals that they've provided. They've done more in the last year than they've done ever, and they continue to do that. I look at the library, and there have in COVID 14,279 patrons, which is 57% saturation rate. And the amount of checkouts during COVID, $4.1 million worth of materials. I'm just so appreciative of both of those. And then I wanted to announce that Maya has been nominated for Citizen of the Year. So Maya Burbank from the Senior Center. So congratulations to Maya. And then I wanted to have you put on your calendars for May 14th for the Sherwood Police Foundation Gala. The tickets will go fast this year. There's less tickets available than in the past. We will be hosting it at the Vine and Sparrow again, May 14th. So more to come on that. That's all I have.
Excellent. Thank you, Renee. Sean?
Yeah, a couple things. Willamette Intake Facility met since our last meeting here to just discuss our plans for getting some updates on their continued construction and refinement to the facility, specifically in a lot of plans to earthquake proof that. So that's always interesting. I think I've shared in the past a link. There's some video that they have of some of their construction crews underwater doing construction work underwater, and they have cameras mounted on their diving equipment. If you are claustrophobic, I would not recommend watching that video. Call out to the Cultural Art Commission. They have a Lunar New Year display at the Art Center in the month of February. You may have seen some posts about it, or maybe you've been to the Art Center, where they've hung a lot of lanterns in the lobby area, and those will be up all through February. And a big shout out to Shanda and the whole crew there as well, that our Art Center is still holding some events in the Art Center and doing a great job doing it as safely as possible. They had the amazing Bubble Man there recently. And then not this weekend, but next weekend, the Voice for the Performing Arts is holding their Frozen 2 play there. I think it's Friday night, Saturday matinee, 2 showings there. So it's Frozen Junior, I apologize. So it's some of our younger thespians from town. So again, just a big shout out for our Art Center to keep things going. Again, during these times, I think art is one of those things that hopefully everybody has really come to appreciate over the last few years as we all sit at home and watch Netflix and try and stay sane. I think the arts are a critical way for us to maintain our sanity. So if you can support the Center for the Arts and our various VPA and Sherwood Foundation for the Arts and all of our local artists in town, everybody would appreciate it. So that's all I've got.
Thanks, Sean. Tim?
Yeah, so I just got a few things. I had a GPI meeting, which is the Small City Consortium, as part of GPI meeting this week, or actually it was last week, I apologize. A really good meeting. A lot of the local, all the cities around us are represented in that meeting, and we had a really rich conversation about the impact of Portland on our economic development in the region. And when I say that, we all understand that Portland has some challenges right now in terms of homelessness and garbage and businesses being shuttered and different issues. And there's a bunch of groups out there trying to combat that and find ways to bring Portland back to the way it used to be. So that was an interesting conversation. I also went to the Metro WPES budgeting forum. I think all of us on council were invited. Anyone else go? Raise your hand. It was exciting. Nope.
No, I did 911.
But it was basically Metro's going through their budgeting process. Their budgeting process is different from the cities. And I think I want to note this because I think the community needs to understand that when we do our budgets, we have a committee that's made up of council and representatives from the city or from our community.
Equal numbers.
People and equal numbers. And we work out a budget together and approve a budget. And then city council has limited ability to change that budget once it's approved. And it's a very transparent process. In the case of Metro, their budget committee is the Metro councilors. So there's a lot less transparency. They do some sessions in terms of reaching out and getting input. And that's what this session was. And I do appreciate that. But part of the commentary I gave back to Metro in that meeting is we need more transparency in their process. They need to bring back their rate committee and have regional representation when they look at garbage rates and tipping fees, which affect rates in all of our communities for our garbage collections, et cetera. So that was a good meeting. I don't know if they appreciated my comments, but I had my soapbox, so I took advantage of it in the meeting. Also had the committee that's looking at design options for the Robinhood parking lot met earlier this month. We have some very exciting, interesting ideas that are coming out for that. And before everyone thinks that they're not going to have to be able to park there anymore, that's not what we're doing. We're trying to make that a better space where we can still have parking, but make it more event friendly. And there's some exciting ideas coming around that I don't want to, I'll let Keith talk about that because I'm sure you're going to talk about that, Keith. You can relay some of that. And then we also had a CAC meeting earlier this month for the Sherwood West relook. I thought it was a great meeting. I think that we have a great group of people on that committee that are doing a great job and really driving that conversation. And I think it's been fun to watch that committee challenge our consultants to think creatively and about how we look at Sherwood West. And just as kind of a PSA and a reminder to the community, this is concept planning. In fact, someone brought up, and I was in a meeting with some residents who live out there today. We're really just brainstorming. We're just kind of deciding, here's the concepts, here's what we think we might want to do with Sherwood West as we move forward. But in no way does that mean that there's going to be bulldozers out there this July, turning up the soil and houses going up. It's the first step in a very, very long process that's mainly governed by state law and Metro in terms of how you bring land in and how it's into the urban growth boundary and then into the city and how it's developed. But it is a process that we need to go through, because if we don't keep an eye on it, if we don't think about how we want to plan it, how it integrates into Sherwood in the future, someone else will do it for us. So it's really important that we do this work. But there are no imminent plans to start development over there in Sherwood West. That's a long, long ways off. So just wanted to throw that out there. And I think, and just in terms of COVID cases, I don't know how closely people watch the numbers, but the numbers have been dropping dramatically recently, which is great news. Everyone's doing their part to be safe and help stop the spread. But it looks like it's, fingers crossed, the numbers are coming down almost as quick as they went up. So we'll keep an eye on that. But that might be some good news for us going forward here. So that's all I got. Thanks, Tim.
I'll keep it brief. I did my first pre-budget sort of meeting with the WCCCA, I believe is right. It's the 911 agency for Washington County. So that was interesting. And coming very soon, a presentation to Cultural Arts Board and Parks Board before then ultimately to City Council on a concept for what the Plaza gravel parking lot could be. Yep, it is very exciting. Still very green, but nice hard surface for events with lots of smart ideas potentially to be in there. And
Hiding the garbage cans.
hopefully,
Yeah.
we're still working on the potential of consolidating garbage on with many of the businesses in the block. Some seasonal covers, shade type awning kind of things, instead of, so you don't necessarily have to put tents up for the events. But anyways, it's kind of cool. So very interested to hear what the Cultural Arts Board and the Parks Board and then the City Council thinks about it. But certainly if things with the goal on that, if council's supportive and everybody else is supportive, and the stars align, which is all a lot of fingers crossed to have it finished before cruising in 2023. So that's the hope, if we all agree that we like it, or some version of it. So anyways, it's cool. Anything else for the good of the order? Hearing none, enjoy the week. And council's going to get together and do some